As is Hashem, today's daf is Masechta Chullin Daf Yud Beis, and we will begin from Daf Yud Beis and Aleph. So about 4 lines from the top. Let's make it big. Okay, so the Gemara says like this: Amar Rav Nachman, Amar Rav. Rav Nachman said in the name of Rav, Ra Echad Sheshachat. You see somebody that made a shchita, and you want to make sure that he did a kosher shchita, or you could eat from that animal. So Rav said, if you see him from the beginning to the end, you saw him shech properly, then mutar lechel mishchitasi. Then you're permitted to eat from his shchita. Vimlav, if you did not see him from the beginning of the shchita to the end of the shchita, also lechel mishchitasi, you're not permitted to eat from his shchita. So said Rav. So the Gemara wants to understand what's the circumstance that Rav was talking about. Dummy, what are we talking about? If we know that this person is a person that knows how to shecht, and he knows the halachas of shchita, he's an expert. Why do you have to have a mashgiach on top of him to see the shchita from the beginning of the beginning to the beginning to the end? He's an expert. If we know that he doesn't know how to, we know for sure that he doesn't know anything about shchita, and he's just amateur. So pshita, certainly you would need somebody mitchila vatzaif in order to eat for shchita, because shchita is such a profession that there's so many possible ways for things to go wrong. Let's review what the things that could go wrong on a shchita, and let's just bring it up over here because it's important. Again, what invalidates the cut is the shia, drasa, chalada, and hagrama and ikur. Let's just review. Shia means you're pausing middle of the cut. Drasa, you're pressing instead of slicing. Chalada means you bury the knife, which means you stick it in between the two simonim. You cut up one, and then you go out and you cut the second one. That's no good. Hagrama is cutting at the wrong location, too high or too low from the location of where you're supposed to cut. And ikur means you tearing rather than cutting. That usually affects the knife when there's a nick on the knife. And remember, with animals, both simonim must be cut, the gullet and the food pipe. And by birds, only one simon should be cut. I just began.
Okay.
So I'm the Daf Yud Beis and Aleph.
Okay.
And we're discussing over here. Rav Nachman said in the name of Rav that if you see somebody do a shchita, if the only time you can eat from his shchita is if somebody else is watching him, that he did a proper job, then it's kosher. But if somebody didn't watch him from the beginning till the end, you're not allowed to eat from a shchita. So the Gemara is saying, what is the circumstance that Rav was talking about? Rav, let's start again. Hey Chedami, what is the circumstance? If he's an expert at shchita, lama li ra, why do you need somebody to watch over him? What do you need a mashgiach on top of him to see? He's an expert. He knows how to shecht. If we know that he knows nothing about shchita and he's just trying his hand at shchita, so of course, pshita, it's very simple that it's not a kosher shchita until somebody's watching him. The Ella says the Gemara, the lo yada igmar iloigmer. He's a type of person that we don't know if he knows the halachas of shchita or does not know the halachas of shchita. So therefore, you need somebody to stand by him from the beginning till the end. Now, here's a very interesting thing that we're going to tell you about shchita. Shchita is like, I would compare it to scuba diving. Nobody is going to attempt to scuba dive unless he's somewhat familiar. And that's what the Gemara is saying. Shchita, because the danger of dealing with an animal, if somebody is attempting to shecht, he must be somewhat familiar with shchita. So lema, let us say, why do I need somebody to watch from the beginning to end? And then it's a kosher shchita. Roiv mitzuin, it's a shchita mumchehein. If most people who are trying to do shchita are experts. And therefore, the guy that's trying it must be an expert. So you don't need a mashgiach to watch him from the beginning till end. Why can we always assume that if something is slaughtered, it's kosher? Now, Miloi Tanya, we're going to have a brisa that says that idea. Hare, here's the case. You're walking on the street and shemotza tarnagoyla shchuta. You find on the street, a bashuk in the street, you find a chicken that's shechted. Let's say it's the 5 towns. You find a shechted chicken in the 5 towns. Or in other cases, she'ama l'shluchai, you told your messenger, say shchait, go shecht. You have a chicken farm, and you told the messenger to go shecht. And the messenger came to the farm, and it was shechted. Somebody broke into the farm and shechted a chicken. So he did it without permission. It's a kosher shchita. Even though nobody watched the shchita, it's a kosher shchita. Alma amrinum, we say, roiv mitzuyin eitz shchita mumchehe. Most people that are found by a shchita, if you see something that is shechted, we're going to say that most people who do a shchita are expert shachtim, and it's kosher anyway. So the question is, hachiname, by this case, lema roiv mitzuyin eitz shchita mumchehe. It's a mishnah, and therefore it's a brisa. So why did Rav say that if you see somebody shech, you only if somebody watches him the whole time, it's a kosher shchita. Why does somebody have to watch him the whole time? Answers the Gemara, because Rav is talking about a unique case. La'olam diyada d'loi gamer. Rav is talking about a case where we know for a fact that this guy is a wild guy, and he knows nothing about shchita. And ukagoin sheshachet kaman chad siman shaper. And then we see him out of the blue shecht one siman perfectly. One let's say the food pipe perfectly. So do we have to see the rest? Now the same, I would think mid the high shopper, since he shechted one pipe good, hachnami shopper, he will shecht the next pipe very good, and you don't have to watch him. Kamash malam, that you have to watch him from the beginning to end. Hi Isramale. The first one he did good because he got a lucky chance. Idach, the second one, Shema Shaha Shema Daris. We're still concerned that he's going to mess up by delaying or pressing down. So there's a lot more to it. Therefore, it won't be a kosher shchita until you watch him the whole time. New Gemara. Rav Dimi Rav Yosef Rav Nachman. Rav Dimi asked the question for Rav Nachman. Somebody says to his messenger, say ushchait, go shecht me an animal. And the shliach went, and he found that it is gishachten. The shliach went to his barn, to the owner's barn, and found the animal slaughtered already. Maho, what's the din? Can you eat from that shchita? Maybe a crook broke into the barn and shechted. Is it kosher? Amaloi, Rav Nachman said, it's a kosher shchita. Now, say utraim. Let's say you send to your messenger, go and do truma, okay? And the owner, the owner followed and found that it's truma. He found that the shliach found that it was truma. Okay, so the shliach went away. We don't know if the shliach did the truma or somebody else did the truma. What's the din? It's not, we don't presume that it's a kosher truma. So here's the first case. The first case says, you tell your messenger, go shecht. And the owner comes and finds, it's the owner that comes and finds that it's geshachten. Balabayas comes and finds that it's geshachten. So now, did the shliach do his mission? Yes. It's assumed that the shliach did his mission and shechted it. But then the second case, Rav Nachman said, if shliach, you told your shliach, take off truma, and then you find that the tvua that you sent it to take off truma is missing truma. So you say that one would say that the shliach followed through on his mission to take off truma. Rav Nachman said, until you hear back from the shliach, we're going to presume ein cheskasei truma. It's not that it's not truma was not taken off. So the Gemara asks, Manashach, how do you explain Rav Nachman's two contradictory Psak. If you always assume when you give him a shliach a mission to do, he's going to follow through to do it. I feel the truma nami. Then we'll let us say that by truma the shliach followed through, so the truma should be considered as if it was taken. If you assume that a shliach, you don't presume a shliach followed through on his mission, so I feel a shchita nami loy. Let us say that shchita, the shliach didn't do the shchita, somebody else did the shchita, so why are you saying it's a kosher shchita? Amalei, so if Nachman said, L'chi techel ala kur de milcha. If you're going to eat some salt, Ms. Rabdimi, I'm going to explain it to you. It's like he was like, kidding around with him because it's a very simple explanation. Really, ein chazaka shliach really, a shliach never did his shlichus. You told him to do it, he probably got distracted and didn't do it. So what happened? Why did you find the animal geschachten? Ushchita inami dilma ina shachrina rishama ba'azol shachet. Even if you heard, even if it was somebody else who shechted it, roiv mitzuyin it's a shchita mumchenein. But most people who are around shchita are mumchen. So even if it wasn't the shliach that shechted, but it must have been another expert that shechted, and therefore, because it's a difficult skill, and therefore it's a kosher shchita. Truma anybody can do. Maybe somebody else took off the truma without the permission of the owner. So once you do truma without, it's easy to take off truma. You just take a piece off. So the one that did it without the permission of the owner is term without the owner. Ain't truma say truma. When you take off truma, you take the truma without the permission of the owner. The truma is not a truma. So when the owner came and found that his tvua had truma taken off, even though he told a messenger to do it, we're not 100% sure that the messenger did it. Perhaps the messenger didn't follow through on his shlichus, and because of that, therefore, we're going to say that the truma is not a truma. Now, this concept of if we're going to always presume that everything is kosher, a shechita is always kosher, because who's going to attempt to do a shecht? Somebody who had the license, or who has the guts to do it, or had the skill to do it. So let's not jump to that. Lema, let us say, that itself, to presume that everybody who does a shechita must be an expert, that could be a machlekes tanoim. The Tanya we learned in a brisa. Let's say you lost your goats, your baby goats or chickens, even if it was stolen from you. And then you found that it was geshechted. So somebody, without permission, slaughtered your chickens and your goat. So Rabbi Yehuda says it's aser. And Rabbi Chanina benoy shel Rabbi Yossi Aglili mater. Rabbi Chanina says it's mutar. And this could be the machlokes. We're going to get to that in a second. Omer Rebbe said, Niran Dvarim shel Rabbi Yehuda, I would paskin like Rabbi Yehuda that it's aser. You can't eat from the shechita shematzon ba'ashpa if you found it in the garbage. Because how did it end up in the garbage? Probably the shechita was a pasal shechita. But divrei Rabbi Chanina benoy shel Rabbi Yossi Aglili, I would paskin like Rabbi Chanina if that it's a kosher shechita, shematzon b'bayis. You found it in a house. In other words, let's say in a campsite, you found it inside a house in a campsite. So you don't know who was there, but it's on the table. So probably it had a kosher shechita. That's what Rebbe said. So let's get back to the machlekes. You found you all of a sudden you lost your animals and your chicken, and you found them shechted. Rabbi Yehuda says it's aser because it was shechted not right. Rabbi Chanina says it's permitted. My lab isn't this what the machlekes is all about? The Rabbi Chanina holds that everybody who shechts must be an expert. So, and if there was a shechita attempted on these animals, it must be that it's a kosher shechita. Umar Sava, Rabbi Yehuda says that you can't eat the animals because you don't say that everybody who's around who does a shechita must be an expert. It's not true. Answers the Gemara, Amar of Nachum Bar Yitzchak, Loi, not so. That's not the way to learn the machlekes. Loi, the Kuli Yalme, everybody holds Roiv Mitzrin Eitz Shechita Mumchemed. Everybody who attempts a shechita must be an expert. Like I said before, it's a very hard skill, and nobody's going to attempt to do a shechita because unless he's somewhat familiar with it. So he must be somewhat of an expert. So if you find something geschachten, it must be kosher. Uba bias, if you find it, let's say in the campsite, in the house, the kuliyam in the cabin, kuliyam alay pligi deshari, that's permitted. Probably was geschachten, and left on the table there. But if you find it in the garbage on the street, the kuliyam alay pligi, the asr. Nobody would argue that it's asr. Why would you put a shechted chicken in the garbage? It must be the shechita, something happened with the shechita that makes it possible. Keep pligi. When is the argument? If you find it in the garbage in the cabin, it's in the cabin, but it's in the garbage. Marsava Adam also hata nivelosi bias. Yehuda says a person will put his disqualified shechita, his nevela, his carcass in the garbage in the house. Even though it might smell up the cabin, he'll leave it there. So it was probably, if it's in the garbage of the house, it was puzzle. And Chanina holds that no way a person would put a discarded carcass in the garbage of the house. He would have taken it outside. And the fact that it's in the house, we can assume that it had a kosher shechita in it. And why did it end up in the garbage? Probably they didn't need it, but it's a kosher shechita. Omamar. So let's see further. Omar Rebbe. Rebbe said, Rebbe paskin that Rebbe Yehuda, if he would paskin like Rebbe Yehuda if you find it in the garbage. My ashba. What does Rebbe mean now? Paskin like Rebbe Yehuda that it's also if you find it in the garbage. Did Rebbe mean that you find it in the garbage on the street? Ha'amrit, you explained, Rav Nachman, the kuliyama loy pligi the aser. Everybody agrees if you find it on the garbage in the street, everybody agrees it's aser. So I don't need to paskin like Rabbi Yehuda that's aser. Even Rabbi Chanina would agree with it's aser. That Rabbi says I would paskin that it's aser if you find it in the garbage in the house. Okay, aim is safer. Then look at the end of the brisa. Rebbe would paskin like Rabbi Chanina that it's permitted if you find it in the house. My bias. What does it mean you find it in the house? You find it in the cabin, and that's why you say it's permitted. Ha'amrit, you just said the kuli amalei pligi deshari. If you find it in the cabin, in the kitchen, in the cabin, certainly it's mutter. Everybody agrees that it's mutter. Ela pshita must be ba'ashpa shebabayis. You found it in the garbage of the house, and therefore Rebbe says that it's permitted because you paskin like Rabbi Chanina. Kasha the Rebbe at the Rebbe. So then you have a question: who does Rebbe paskin when you find it in the garbage of the house? Does he paskin like Rabbi Yehuda that it's aser, or do you paskin like Rabbi Chanina that it's mutter? So how do you explain Rebbe's discussion in the brisa? So the Gemara says, "Hochi kamar." That's exactly what the brisa is saying. Amud Beis. The brisa is saying that's what Rebbe said. That is the machlekes between Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Chanina. Nivrim divrei Rabbi Yehuda le Rabbi Chanina b'noich Rabbi Yosei Galili. That Rabbi Chanina would agree to Rabbi Yehuda that it's aser if you find it in the garbage in the street. Rabbi Chanina only permitted in the garbage in the house, but in the garbage in the street, he would agree it's aser. Then on garbage in the street, he would agree that it's asa. And the reverse is true. V'nira, Reb Chanina, v'nira, the words of Reb Chanina to Rabbi Yossi. Rabbi Yossi says it's asar, but Rabbi Yossi would agree to Rabbi Yehuda that if you find it on the house, on the cabin itself, on the table, it's permitted. It's permitted because it's in the house. The only machlekes is if you find it in the garbage in the cabin, right? So why would somebody put it a geschachten, a nice meat in the chicken in the garbage of the cabin? Either Rabbi Yehuda says the shechita was pasul, Rabbi Chanina says no, the shechita was kosher, because if it was pasul, they would throw it out into the street. The reason why they put it in the garbage in the house, in the cabin, probably they didn't need it anymore. Nu Gemara. Chutz mecheret shaita v'katan. Shema yikalkulu es shchitasan. You don't give a shecheret shaita v'katan the shchita because maybe they will mess up the shchita. Shema kilkalu loikatanu el shema yikalkalu. You're saying maybe they messed up. If nobody watched them, maybe they messed up. You say Shema Yikalkul, maybe they will mess up. How do you explain this part of the Mishnah? Amarava, the Mishnah is teaching you another idea. True, the halacha is that a cheresh shaita v'katam are permitted to shecht if somebody's watching them shechting. If somebody's overseeing it, then the shechita is okay. But zois emeres, the halacha is a moisr lam kulin lechatchila. We don't allow them to shech as a first step because there's a good chance shema yikalkalu, maybe they're going to mess. They have a high probability of messing up, and therefore it could lead to baltashchis. Right? You're giving them to mess up. You're giving them a chicken, and you tell them, "I'm going to watch you shech." Most likely they're going to mess the shechita. There's a good chance, and then you're wasting a chicken. So the chatchila you shouldn't do it. But says the Mishnah, if the chulam sheshachtu v'cheim roim oisem, in all these cases, that every case in the Mishnah, if they shechted and other people were watching them, shchitasim tishera, the shechita is kosher. That you could, a gadol, an adult watching a katan shecht or shaita shecht, it's kosher. Now, Mamtara, who's the author of our Mishnah? Deloy be'ina kavana l'shchita, that you don't have to have intention to shecht. In fact, it could mean it could be automatic. You could shecht. I mean, you need a human there, but he doesn't have to think about what he's doing. Because if you're allowing a katan to shecht, it's because the katan is not thinking about what he's doing. And nevertheless, you say it's kosher. Who is the author that holds that opinion that you don't need any thought, awareness of what you're doing when you shech? Amarava Rab Nosani. The author is our Mishnah's Rab Nosan. The Tani Oishia Zira de Min Chavraya. The Rab Oishia, the small one from the group. Ashaya, there was a big Ashaya, and a Brisa, the small Ashaya taught us a Brisa. The Brisa is discussing Zorak Sakin. You threw a knife. You're throwing knives at a wall to stick it into a wall. And without you realizing it, and it shechted like normal. And now you didn't have any intention to shecht; you were just throwing it as a dart on the wall, right? And nevertheless, let me see if I can have a picture. Nevertheless, we say that it's kosher. See here, the guy threw it, and the knife sliced open an animal. You see, as he threw the knife, and he sliced open an animal. So he did a shechita. And we say, Rab Nosson says it's kosher. The Chachamim Paisim, Chachamim say it's pasul. So, who Tanalav, who Amala, Ishaya taught this brisa, and he said, our Mishnah is, of course, Rab Nosson, that makes it kosher, and the halacha is like Rab Nosson. And therefore, if a gadol is observing a katan shecht, even the katan has no das, he has no awareness that he's shechting, it will still be a kosher shechita. Says the Gemara, just one question. When you shecht, you have to go, if you have a small knife, you have to go back and forth. And by you throwing a dart on the wall, you only went in one direction, but you should be going back in another direction. And says the Gemara, yes, it's possible that you throw it against the wall. It slid, hit the wall and slid backwards. So that's how you can do it. As you can see in the illustration, that he threw it against the wall, hit the wall, and number two, right over here, it ricocheted off the wall and then slaughtered the animal. It ricocheted off the wall and slaughtered the animal in the other direction. So in the Mele, it becomes a good shechita. Now, Rashi points out it's only because when the knife is small, you need to go back and forth. If the knife is very, very long, if you have a very long knife, you don't need to go back and forth. But the Gemara assumes that even with a knife that's small, it's possible to throw something against the wall. It can hit the wall, ricochet back, and do another shechita in the other, finish the shechita in the other direction. Bottom line is, you don't need the intention of doing what you're doing. Even if you didn't have any kavana, it's still going to be a kosher shechita. Okay, we're going to stop right over here.
Thank you, Baruch Shakir.
Okay, very good. Good to know. Thank you for joining.
Okay.